Behind every collector's obsession lies a personal story. For Frank Fritz, that story was hidden away in his own garage. After his death, loved ones uncovered something they never expected, a car so tied to Frank's past, it revealed a side of him the cameras never showed. What was this car? Why was it hidden? And why did it matter so much to Frank? The reason the car that was locked away in his home was far more jarring, and when you know what it is, you're never going to believe it. You know how every small town has that one place that just has something nostalgic about it? For Frank Fritz, that place was his garage. While we'd like to get into details about the old car covered in dust, it won't be complete to talk about the man who built a whole life out of finding forgotten things and then, along the way, became one himself. Frank wasn't your typical TV star. He wasn't all about fame, or fast cars, or fitting into any Hollywood box. All he cared about were rusty signs, old gas pumps, and the kind of stuff most people would drive past without a second glance. So when word got out that his car was found in his garage, everyone was shocked. To understand why it was such a big deal, we need to step back a little and get to know who Frank was, because once you see who he was, you'll understand why that car wasn't just another find. Frank Fritz. Before Frank Fritz ever stepped in front of a camera or the world knew who he was a regular kid growing up in Davenport, Iowa. He didn't grow up in a rich home, but he was quite special. He wasn't like the other kids, he was often fascinated by what most of his peers at the time didn't care about. While other kids were chasing sports or collecting trading cards, Frank was lining up beer cans by color and shape. He'd stash old stamps in showboxes, dig up rocks in the backyard, and proudly show them off. Even his room looked more like a flea market than a bedroom, and he liked it that way. Frank's passion didn't just come up randomly. He was a curious boy who liked to ask tons of questions, and that stuck with him long after childhood. As he got older, he took a job as a fire inspector. It was a steady and responsible job, but that wasn't what he wanted to do. He yearned to collect, a habit that never left him as he grew. On his off days, he'd drive across Iowa and the surrounding towns, popping into garage sales, estate auctions, or roadside stands. If something inconsequential like an old oil can or a vintage sign caught his eye, he'd take it home to keep it. People who knew Frank back then said he always had that laid-back, friendly persona. He was approachable and a bit scruffy. He was the kind of guy you'd run into at a local diner with a laugh that made you feel like you'd known him forever. Somewhere along the way, his picking habits started turning into something more. People began calling him when they had things to get rid of, and soon enough word got around that Frank had an eye for antiques and oddities. Slowly, he started making small sales on the side. What had once been a hobby was starting to look like a second career. That's when Mike Wolfe came into the picture. Mike had been picking for years too, and he had a vision that involved turning the strange world of antique hunting into a television show. He and Frank had known each other from the picking scene in Iowa. They weren't best friends, but they shared a love for forgotten stuff, and most importantly, they had a knack for getting rid of things people no longer found valuable. The two of them went hand in hand. Frank had the charm, the beard, and the jokes. These were attributes that made you the right guy for the job, and Mike knew that. Soon enough, Frank quit his job as a fire inspector and went full-time into collecting and founded Frank's Finds. Mike, alongside, worked with him as they'd sometimes travel long distances just to dig around strangers' junkyards. Mike, who had wanted to make a show out of their business, started making videos of what they were doing and was trying to pitch it to networks. All they had was passion for the work and a strong vision. How did two local collectors from Iowa end up becoming not just America's favorite collectors but also ending up having a TV show? Let's find out. The rise of the pickers. After several years, the History Channel came calling, and when they did, Frank had already built a quiet, loyal following among local collectors. He wasn't famous, not yet, but his name meant something in the world of pickers. People trusted his eye, his word, and his gut when it came to old stuff with untold stories. So when producers were looking for something new, something real, Frank and Mike's brand of roadside treasure hunting felt like the right fit. American Pickers debuted in 2010, and from the very first episode, it hit a nerve. The premise was simply two guys in a van, driving across the backroads of America, digging through barns, garages, and storage units in search of forgotten history. But it wasn't the finds that made it stick, it was the people. Also, Frank stood out the most even though he wasn't trying to sell anything. What was charming about him was the fact that he wasn't pretending to be something he wasn't. He wore his flannel shirts, cracked jokes, and got excited over rusty metal signs. He felt familiar to people watching, and that was what attracted viewers to him. Behind the scenes, it was more than just Frank and Mike on the show. There were other cast members like Danielle Colby, who ran things from the shop back in Iowa, keeping the whole operation grounded. She had her own charm, her own grit, and helped round out the team. Together, the three of them created something that wasn't about the money or the fame. They all genuinely loved the thrill of the hunt, the beauty behind the old things they found, and the excitement of stumbling across something no one had laid eyes on in decades. Frank's specialty became clear as the years went by. He had an eye for vintage motorcycles, rare signage, and quirky old toys. While Mike often chased the big-ticket items, Frank was the one who'd light up over a hand-painted oil can or a decades-old lunchbox. His reactions to finding these items were what made it fun to watch. The show caught on fast not just in the US, but around the world. People everywhere connected with that feeling of discovery. And soon, Frank went from being just a picker to being a piece of Americana himself. The beard, the banter, and the belly laugh were all it took for him to become a beloved part of the show. But as the seasons rolled on, things began to change. Frank started showing signs of physical and emotional tiredness. His health took a toll. He experienced back pains that slowed him down, and not only was that the problem, but tension also began to bubble between him and Mike. The light-hearted chemistry that once came easy started to feel off. Some fans noticed, others ignored it, but it didn't change the fact that something was changing. There were rumors about creative and personal differences. Frank's screen time also began to drop until he was gone altogether just like that. No big goodbyes. No special send-off. Just silence. For viewers who had watched him for over a decade, it was jarring.